I think it's interesting because once people gain some experience with letting go of simple things, right, then they can actually translate that into letting go of other things, right? And again, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the person. It's just maybe we're just ready to complete this and move on. It's not serving you anymore.
Hello, hello. Welcome to today's session of Selling the Couch. I hope you're doing well, having an incredible day. So, today's podcast session is all about decluttering and specifically how decluttering can be a supplement to therapy. I'm joined by my friend Sarah Mueller over at the declutteringclub.com. Sarah and I actually connected about 8 years ago. We were part of Stu McLaren's tribe community. So, in the early days of my podcasting course, one of the things that we had been thinking about was, do I just have this as a course only offering, or is there like a membership site opportunity that's there? Sarah and Sarah hosted a meetup of like local entrepreneurs 7 to 8 years ago. And I remember at that meetup, we spent a lot of time just Sarah and I just talking and just connecting because I felt like there was so much alignment when it came to values and how we sort of saw things and all of these things. Since then, Sarah has grown a massive following online. She'll share some more of the numbers, but we are now, talking like hundreds of thousands of people following her. She's built a very, very successful business around this concept of decluttering. I, wanted to have Sarah on just to kind of share her story, but more about decluttering and this concept of it, because I feel like many of us as clinicians, especially, are in seasons of life where we're thinking about letting things go. And especially as the pandemic, in the midst of the pandemic and after the pandemic, I think so many of us have had losses and we're trying to now figure out what the purpose of a lot of things are. And part of that means that we let things go. So we start off by talking about Sarah's story, why this was such an important mission for her. We talk about exactly what decluttering means. Before this conversation, I had this like assumption of like decluttering means like, a certain thing, but it actually means a more holistic thing, which I love the way that Sarah describes it. We talk about some of the benefits of decluttering, and then we talk about the real meat of this is about how do you start decluttering when you're feeling overwhelmed. And then we get into a little bit deeper of, I know many of us are really have a lot of our old books. We love collecting books, but if we're not careful, books can take up a ton of space. And sometimes might be meaningful to us, but how do you declutter in the midst of like declutter books essentially? And then we finally talk about how decluttering can be a supplement to therapy, and some of the ways that can be truly helpful. So here's my conversation with Sarah Mueller from the declutteringclub.com. Welcome to Selling the Couch.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me, Melvin. This is such a treat.
It's we were talking about this right before, but it has been probably a good 8 years since we connected, and we were thinking about like our businesses and like just little babies in the business world. And first of all, I'm just so grateful that even in the midst of a long period of time of not like connecting, that we can just like pick up, and I think I love when there are relationships with folks where it can do that, and I definitely consider you one of them. And yeah, I'm just so thankful for you and for our conversation today.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I mean, it's true, right? We just hopped right on and like literally, I don't think I've seen you in my Facebook feed and maybe once or twice, but it didn't matter, right? Because I think we have so many things in common and we have a lot of shared values. And so, like, 8 years is just like, it's like a day.
Yeah,
So it's great
right.
to be here.
Yeah, a day in a pandemic and all that kind of stuff, right? So
Exactly.
I have a ton of questions for you, but I wanted to start here. What's your story that made you want to create Decluttering Club? I mean, which has grown into a uber successful business. But what's like the backstory on all of this?
Yeah, I I've always been a very organized person, right? Like my life is organized, but it was not always decluttered. And I spent probably 10 plus years of my adult, no, more than 10 years of my adult life just really struggling to keep up and really frustrated, right? Because so I have four kids now. I think at the time when I started decluttering, I had three. But it's just like, why, why, if I'm already organized and I know how this is supposed to work, like why is my house always messy? And why do I always feel like I'm just absolutely exhausted? There must be something I can do about this, right? And so like over time I kind of had this aha moment of, oh, it's not an organization problem, right? I don't need to go buy more bins. I don't need to, I don't just need a weekend where the kids are, somewhere else so I can clean up. Like I had plenty of that. But that wasn't the answer to the problem. The problem was that I just had more stuff than I needed, more stuff that I could process. So once I realized that and started letting go, oh my gosh, Melvin, my life got so much easier. And I have four kids again, four kids. It's a lot of kids, right? And I had a home business at that point. I had a different business, and life just got easier. And I was like, oh my gosh, everybody needs to know this.
Mm.
This is like people actually don't know this. So I started talking about it. And, when you're talking about it to your friends, they might be like, oh, that's great. Like they may or may not be interested. But when I started sharing online, and I had a blog at that point, I started sharing online, and people are like, oh, that's cool, right? And they wanted to hear more. And so that's how we started. And it's just grown over time. I've just realized, okay, there's so much we can do, again, to make life easier. Like my tagline is less stuff, more life. Like this is not about just like getting rid of stuff to get rid of stuff. Like I'm not a minimalist, although I'm getting closer and closer every day, but I want I want people to have an easier life. I want them to have room for what matters to them. Like this is, I believe, desperately important. This is not just a nice to have. This is not just about getting cleaned up or saving a little time. No, this is about like redeeming your life and then doing the things that you actually want to do. And I feel like I have the answer to that.
Yeah, really well said. You said one of the things was that the business has grown over time. So, I mean, can you give us like a glance of followers, like any of this stuff that's been happening? Because I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen you and I've tracked it, but yeah,
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's so crazy, isn't it? It's
yeah,
like it is it's just it's phenomenal, and I think, maybe it seems like it's happened, people may be watching, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you blew up overnight," but of course that's not the truth, right? And we know this now. We've been friends for 8 years. I mean, that's a long time to work on the same thing. So, I think when we started out had basically I was starting from zero in terms of my social media following. I had an email list. I've always loved to email my community. I feel like it's like the one-to-one connection, so I love that. But we started out with basically zero social media in 2018, and that was when I really started focusing in on the decluttering. And we actually went viral like really fast. Like once I kind of learned some techniques. So we had some viral posts, but it's just grown over time. So let's say from zero, and right now on Facebook we have 187,000 followers. On Instagram, I think there's 136,000, right? And I'm not sure about YouTube, but it's just built over time. We have thousands of people in the membership, and tens of thousands who participate when we do a challenge. So it's really, really like there's a demand. There's a huge need for what we're teaching. So it's pretty cool.
how has it been for you? Well, before I even say this, like you're one of the most humble and grounded people that I've ever met. Because I remember when we met 8 years ago, that was one of the first impressions that I had of you. Like you're were successful and but you are like you're just a nice person and I love when good people win. What has it been like for you to see something? I mean, again, this is not overnight, but to see it grow like this, right? And how has it changed you internally?
Well, it's required me to grow.
Mm,
I mean, I can say, and I do believe this. This has never been about me, right? This is not about me. This is not the Sarah show, but it kind of also is, right?
mm,
Like my community is looking to me to lead them, and when I'm willing to accept that, then I can grow into the leader that I feel that I want to be for this community. So that's been a little challenging. Like I would much rather, be like, hey, we're all in this together. And we are, but also like I'm leading the ship here.
mm,
And the more that I do that, the better. Um, because I feel like there's just such a need. And I can't fill that need if I am not willing to say, here's where we're going, here's what's going on, here's what I want, and I have just, it has been it has been challenging,
mm.
like to grow as a leader, to have a team, to have, to give direction. Um, Not easy, but I think really, really good work. I think it's probably the most important work that I've done. So it's been a good journey.
Yeah, really well said. I think this is one of the things of entrepreneurship. I think it was a little naive too, the way that it stretches you and forces you to become become even somebody maybe you had aspired to become, but I don't
Hmm.
know, something like entrepreneurship, I feel like is such an accelerant to that growth.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, so as I shared, I've got a lot of questions for you, and maybe we could just start here. What exactly does decluttering mean?
Oh, I love that question. Some people think it means like putting things away or moving things around. I have a very simple definition. It's just letting go of anything that doesn't serve you. Okay, so like I can't look at your house, or I can't look at anyone's house and say, "Oh, you should declutter that." Like I have no idea, right? And a lot of times people don't understand that because they'll be like, "Oh, don't tell me to get rid of my stuff. It's not, like I love my clutter." And I'm like, "But then it's not clutter, is it? If
Mm,
it's serving you, if you want to keep it, then it's not clutter, and I would encourage you to keep it. Now, just be careful because are you sure that it's all serving you, right? A lot of times people don't really take a look, and we could dive into that. But just letting go of anything that isn't needed anymore. It doesn't mean that, a lot of times people think, well, if I let this thing go, it means that it's no good, or it means that I made a mistake, or whatever. It means I don't love that person, and that's not what it means at all. It's
mm.
just letting go of, what you don't need or what you don't want to keep in your possession.
Two questions there, but we'll start with this first one. How do you distinguish between what serves you versus like rationalizing, like something could be clutter, right? But you just sort of rationalize it as like it's serving me.
Mm, yeah, I think it's just a question of being honest with yourself. You know, something you might decide. I'm like, do you like your reason? Why are you keeping something? We dig into this a lot. In our membership and our community, like, why are you keeping that thing? Are you keeping it because you feel like you're going to collapse into a puddle of tears if you let it go? Like, okay, maybe you like that reason, but maybe you don't, right? Maybe you think, okay, this can be super hard, but also it's the right thing. It's just it's again, being honest with yourself about why you're keeping something. If you're keeping it because you love it to pieces, amazing. If you're keeping it because you don't want to make your mother-in-law mad, like probably not a great choice. But again, that's not my job. So everybody needs to decide for themselves and get really clear on that.
Mm. One thing I hear in all of this is there has to be a lot of like internal work that has to be done and the meaning we attribute to it, but even not just the meaning to the thing, but I think the fear of letting it go,
Mm,
right? Whether it's like family dynamics or personal, whatever it is, right? I feel like that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like that's where the real work is happening. It's not
mhm.
just about the thing.
Of course, absolutely. Right, like, you know, it's these we're talking about t-shirts and coffee mugs and, old pieces of paper, right, photos, but no, we're not. We're talking about memories. We're talking about, that thing that I remember because of XYZ. It's all about emotions. It's all about the stories that we associate with the things. And that's why it's challenging, right? If you don't have a story behind something, you're like, oh, it doesn't really matter. Like, I'm not attached. Like, it can go. But there's always an emotional reason behind why we keep something or why we don't want to let it go.
Mm, yeah. I mean, even to drive this home, I drive a 2004 Toyota Camry
Uh-huh.
and it's going strong, like 20 years, right? And my wife recently has been like, "Hey, it's time we get a new car," because but I'm like, "It only has 123,000 miles in it." But
Oh.
I
Mhm.
think when I, like, think about it more, it's what it represents, right? The That was my first college. My parents got me that
Mm.
when I graduated undergrad, and that car has taken me from, Texas to Nashville to Philly, like, there's
Yes.
so much, like, journeying and all of that, it's not
Yes.
just a car, you know?
Right. And what does it mean if you were to let it go? Like, what does that mean? Does that mean that you're, like too good for it? Does it mean like you're no longer in that phase of life? Does it mean, what does it mean? You have to
Yeah,
figure out what you want it to mean.
absolutely. You said something a couple of minutes ago, which correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said something around like, "I love this person," so it could also be relationships and not just stuff. Is that an accurate assumption?
You mean like what you're letting go of or the
Yeah,
reasons that
the
you're
letting go of, like, could there be, like, friendships or someone in your life that, like, does it just have to be items, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it could be all of the above, right? I mean, we could declutter our things, we can declutter our time, our commitments. I think it's all rolled up together. We might want to keep something because we're afraid of, missing that thing. We might, even though that thing isn't really serving us. Maybe it's like that with a relationship. We love the person, but the relationship doesn't feel like it's serving us. But we're like, I don't know how to let that go. So very, very similar. And I think it's interesting because once people gain some experience with letting go of simple things, right? Then they can actually translate that into letting go of other things, right? And again, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the person. It's just maybe we're just ready to complete this and move on.
Mm,
It's not serving you anymore.
yeah, I love how you distinguish that. What and you're speaking to this, but I was wondering if we just, go a little deeper into this. What are some of the benefits of decluttering?
I mean, I think you had asked me earlier, like, what are the top two or three? And I was like, oh, I don't even, I could go on for days. But I think like initially there's just like a sense of relief, right? Because I think that a lot of times you know what you want to get rid of, you know what you want to let go of, but it's just hard.
Mm,
So, but once you do it on the other side, there's like peace and relief. And I think that is maybe like the biggest benefit, just because again, you want to, you're just not ready or you don't know how. So just a little bit of freedom or a lot of freedom, really, peace and relief is a huge benefit. I mean, on the practical side, you're going to be saving money. Oh my gosh. You're going to like we have people, first of all, they start finding money.
mm,
They will literally find money in piles of paper and they'll find checks and they'll find cash, like actual dollars. They're going to stop like losing things, right? So you're going to be saving money because you're not losing things and having to buy them again, or you have duplicates of whatever. So you're going to save money and time. It's going to be so much easier to put your hands on things. Like again, like I mentioned before, my life got easier when I started letting things go, and I kind of thought it would be the opposite. I felt like these things are helping me to be prepared for whatever comes my way. Right? I got all the things. I've got the, whatever toys we may need. I would have, whatever kitchen gadget is useful. But it turns out that there's a point of decreasing returns, right? So if you have no toys, right, let's say for your daughter, no toys in your house, probably not going to work out so well, right? But if you have 5,000 toys in your house, that's probably not great either. So there's like a happy medium where it's going to work out well for her. You're going to be able to clean them up. You'll be able to put them away. It's not going to be overwhelming. So I do feel like there's this tremendous lightening of what it means to just maintain our stuff.
Mm.
And that's huge. And people don't realize that they are spending so much time on their stuff. They have no idea until it's gone, and then they think, "Oh my gosh, why do I feel so light?" It's because you have let go of that mental burden as well as this stuff.
Yeah. There's a phrase that I'll use in therapy off and on, which is like, just because like something is not familiar, it doesn't like because something is not familiar or because something is familiar doesn't mean it's like good for us,
Mm, absolutely.
right? Like, and I think all of us fall into that of this is a thing that we have, or this is a way that we've interacted with somebody, or whatever it is, right? But because it's comfortable and familiar, we just keep it up because, at least for me, I can speak, but like it's almost like the anxiety of not of trying to do something else that initially overwhelms the desire
Hmm.
to change and do something,
Hmm.
even if rationally I know it probably is the best choice long term.
Hmm. Totally agree.
Um, Speaking of which, I feel like one of the things that a lot of folks struggle with when they are thinking about decluttering is this anxiety or this sense of overwhelm. So how should one go about like decluttering when you are like have that initial feeling of overwhelm, especially?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to realize what you just said, right? The familiar is comfortable even if it's not serving us. So I think realizing that it might be challenging. There might be some anxiety or fear when you start to let go. That's okay. Like that's totally normal. And it doesn't mean that anything has gone wrong. So just like noticing, oh, right, this is the time where I start to get overwhelmed. Okay, cool. Like if you know that's going to happen, then it's not going to stop you. Okay. And we really like to like take the tiniest baby steps possible. Like the more overwhelmed you are, the smaller your steps should be. And we teach what we call the 10-minute decluttering method, right? Anybody can do anything for 10 minutes. Um, and then you stop, right? So you just say, I'm going to work on this, this little corner or this section of this drawer. I'm going to look for what are the things that we can let go of. And then we're going to stop. We're going to walk away. We're going to do something else. And you could even make it smaller than that if you want. We teach what we call micro wins, right? So it's literally like, is there a pen that you can put away? That's a micro win, right? And you can enjoy and appreciate that, and that will add up over time too. So that is the most important thing. Is just to really start small and just do it with like a ton of care and compassion for yourself. I think so many times people think they have to guilt themselves into doing the work. They have to push. They have to just go and do the whole garage in the weekend, and that just does not work out well. Right? So we take the absolute opposite approach. Let's just dip our toe in the water and then let's keep going. Over time, if you did 10 minutes a day for a month, you've got 300 minutes. It's a lot of minutes, and it will add up, and it's much more sustainable. So that's how we like to start.
Yeah, that's a great way of approaching it. I think the thing I love you're especially saying in that is it's being kind to like our nervous system, right? To go
Yes.
from the zero to like, I don't know, spending, like you said, like a whole day cleaning out a garage, right? That just feels really taxing on many levels. Whereas these little 10-minute chunks, it's almost like you're priming your nervous system and just like regulating it. I almost think of it
Yeah.
like the loving kindness kind of
Mhm.
method, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a woman, she had her entire bedroom was packed with boxes. I mean, I think there was a little bit of room to walk, but pretty much it was packed. And she literally did her bedroom 10 minutes at a time. And she got to the end. And it was and then she became a coach, right? Because it had just worked out so well for her. So she went through a coaching program. But you don't have to, just push, push, push in order to have success. You can, it might take longer, but it takes a lot longer is if you start, you push yourself, you get overwhelmed, and then you shut down and you never want to do it again. Like that, then you're never going to get to the end. So yeah, I think it's imperative that people approach this with love and kindness for themselves, and then maybe also for the other people in their homes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I have a really random question next for you. So I feel like a lot of therapists struggle with this, including me, but many of us like love books and especially like,
Yeah.
like physical books. But if you're not careful, like it can fill up like entire rooms or entire bookshelves or whatever. What tips do you have when it comes to decluttering books? I'm specifically like thinking about like my old like grad school like books
Yeah.
that most of them are
Yeah.
gotten rid of, but the reality is I'm not gonna go like look at stuff from 10 years ago. It's probably like majority of it's
Yeah.
outdated anyway. So
But we like those books, like it's kind of like the car, right? They were there with you. You poured so much into them. I had that with homeschool books. So I used to homeschool my kids, and you know, homeschoolers love their books, right? And I had a couple teachers' manuals that I had just written in, right? And they had notes and they were beat up. And, the more beat up they were, the more I loved them because it meant that I had like lived with that book for months, years, right? And I had actually given away most of our homeschool books. Like most of it had gone, but I had like these manuals, and we had stopped homeschooling like years before. And I had these manuals that are sitting on the shelf, and it was like, I couldn't donate them. Like these were not, people are like, oh, you should donate them. These were not donatable. They were just not like in good shape. And so I finally came to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm trying. I'm having a hard time just letting go of the fact that I'm no longer a homeschooler. But guess what? I'm no longer a homeschooler, right? Like that time in my life is over, and it was beautiful and it was hard and like it was amazing. But that's now over. And if I'm going to hold on to these, this is for me, right? If I'm going to hold on to these, then I feel like I'm not quite ready to move forward. And so I ended up recycling them, after like a lot of thought. But I was like, what does it mean for me to let this book go? And I think it meant I'm actually finally closing that chapter. But that's okay.
mm,
Like I could be okay with that. And it could also be hard. Like both things could be true, you know.
yeah, I mean, the word I kept thinking about is grief, right? There's a grief
Hmm.
in a lot of this process, of grieving that season of life, grieving
Yes,
kiddos getting older, grieving that they don't need you to that level of like teaching and
exactly.
training them. And I mean, that's the
Yeah.
real work.
Yeah. But it's like if we try to just hang on to those things, right? Let's imagine, your kid, like if it's hard to see our kids grow up, we're like, oh my gosh, I missed the time when they were so little. And so we keep things that will help us to feel like, oh, that's what it's like. And again, this is all optional. I'm not saying get rid of all your stuff. Like, don't hear me wrong, please. I am not the person that's like, get rid of all of it. But just be thoughtful in what you do keep because the truth is like your kids are not supposed to stay little. Like it's a good thing if they're growing up, right? It's a tragedy if they don't. And we can talk about that too, but we want our kids to grow and mature and grow up and become adults. So if we're trying to like kind of stay in the past, we're missing out on what's going on for them right now, wherever they are, whether they're 10 or 24 or 54. So I think just acknowledging that things do change, and maybe there's some grief associated with that, and that's all so normal. But if we resist that, I think then we actually we do more harm than good. If we're just trying to ignore it, like we're trying to pretend it's not what it is, that's when we have suffering. Like Byron Katie, she says when we argue with what is, we're going to lose, but only every time, right? So if we're trying to remember, if we're trying to get back to grad school, like is you're just going to be suffering, right? And look at you, you're amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like that's so awesome that you are not at that point in your life anymore. And also that was an amazing time.
Yeah, so I hear a couple of things in this. So one is like being able to, like you said, hold simultaneous positions, right? Like this is an and both situation. And then
Yes.
uh the I think the other piece of it is, I don't know, the more I mean, I found myself recently because, I'm this year is like 20 years since I left undergrad, right? And I was thinking a lot about that and I was like, man, that was a cool part of life. And I wish like I knew what I know now, like things would be okay, like all of that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I found myself again is like talking to my therapist about this, and what I found myself is getting sometimes to a point where there was like such a sadness, like it was almost like mentally I was like back there and longing for that, but in a way that like I was holding on tighter to some sort of like idealized memory of, what things were
Mm-hmm.
like 20 years
Yeah.
ago or something.
Yeah. I think we romanticize the past, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
We really do. We forget all the bad stuff and we're like, "Oh, it was so nice back then. It was so, it was so wonderful." Yeah, it was. And it's nice now,
Yeah.
right? In
Yeah.
a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. There were a lot more grays in all of life, right? In all seasons of
Yeah.
life, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I've got like I know we're coming right up on time. So I've got two kind of final questions for you. So one is when we were chatting via DM, you mentioned that you did this training on releasing sentimental items, and you had this theory that letting these items go is often a requirement for healing. And I was wondering if you
Mm.
could talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, this is such an important topic. And again, we don't recommend that people start with the hard stuff, right? The quote unquote hard stuff. But eventually they're probably going to want to get there, right? They're going to want to get to those things. And we do work with people that maybe have lost a loved one and, maybe everything is preserved for years, right? So it's not a question of time at that point, and we never encourage people to rush through things. But I do think that sometimes we think, well, when I'm ready, I'm going to let that thing go, right? When I'm ready, I'm going to let whatever, right, those items go. But I also think that sometimes the letting go will then encourage the readiness, right? Like we have it backwards. We have the order backwards. And if we can let things go, maybe in a way that honors, let's say, that person or that time of your life, maybe you can donate that car to, to something that will sell it for charity, right? Like,
Mm,
oh, now all of a sudden our grief has been used for something beautiful and productive, and sometimes that can really be healing. I think a lot of times people, they feel like they didn't have any control in what went down, like how they lost that person or how that situation turned out, like it was out of their control. So they're going to compensate by controlling their stuff,
mm,
right? By keeping things the same, by maintaining, right? Like that's their coping mechanism. And what I want to offer in that situation is that, maybe you didn't have the control, like back whenever that let's say that trauma happened, you didn't have the control, but your way of exhibiting control now is by intentionally letting go,
mm,
right? And saying, I am, making a choice now to let this thing go. And it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean I like what happened. It doesn't mean I don't love that person, but I need to do this for myself now. And so I'm letting go on purpose in a controlled way, so that I can have some peace. Does that make sense?
yeah. Yeah, it absolutely. I think it goes back to that thing we were talking about earlier of like having compassion for yourself.
Hmm.
And realizing like especially as you have more sentimental items, often not, it's a process versus just like a thing you just do once, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I shared a quote on social media recently. Is in this book by this author. Her name is Brianna West, and she said, "We're not when we're decluttering, we're not really letting go. We're not really letting things go. We're just accepting what's already gone.
Mm,
And
mm,
I'm like, that quote makes me cry because I'm
mm,
like, oh my gosh, it's just accepting what already is. And it's like, wow, like that blows my mind, because these things, they're just a they're just a shadow of the reality. Like they're and maybe they bring back the memories, but it's not the same,
mhm.
right? So when we accept what's already gone, now we're not arguing with reality. It's so painful to argue with reality. And I think people think if I stop arguing with it, it means I'm okay with it. It doesn't have to mean that. It just means like this is what is. Like this is what we got. And then we can move forward. But when we're trying to get back into the past, it unfortunately doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. So well said. Uh, Final question I have for you is, how do you think working with a decluttering expert can supplement therapy?
We have so many clients. We have so many members that work with a therapist or a psychiatrist. I think it's an absolutely wonderful combination. Because we can work on the practical, right? So we start out very practical, and then someone can bring their decluttering work to their therapy sessions, and discuss the emotional aspects of it. So I think it really, really works very well. We can just support them, and then we also have the community too, so that people can discuss what's going on. So there's just like this beautiful like back and forth. I think it works out really, really well. A lot of times, what we do, in our communities, in our programs, will really be very complementary to what people are talking about in therapy. So it's pretty cool. I love it when people are doing both sides of that.
Yeah, it seems like a very like holistic way to heal,
Hmm.
because you're doing both the practical work as well as the emotional work,
Hmm.
and just that combo.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, you can start with the emotional work, right? You can start with just thinking through and discussions, and then you may end up, changing your behavior, right? And what's going on at home. Or you can go the opposite direction, right? You can start cleaning up, and you just do your kitchen, and then you think, wow, I kind of feel better about myself. Like, what happened? Right? You can go either direction, and ideally you're working at it from both sides. But it's just really cool how people's opinion of themselves, like their self-worth, will grow when they start taking care of their surroundings. Like literally just doing the dishes, cleaning out the junk drawer. Like it actually especially, okay, here's the caveat though. You got to do it with love. You can't just clean it up, because you're like embarrassed or because someone's coming over and you feel like, you're in panic. That does not work. So, it's this amazing benefit that happens when people start to do this work. They go, oh my gosh! Like we have one woman. She said she was having panic attacks regularly, and after a couple months in our community, she just like they went away.
Mm.
She was like, what? That's kind of cool. So it just it all goes hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the power of community. It's the power of doing the inner work, right? And ultimately, I think um, having a space and creating a space to be able to get out of our own heads, right?
Yes, so
About
important.
how we think about it. Sarah,
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for you. Where can we learn more about the awesome work that you're doing in the world?
Yeah, so we are on social everywhere at the Decluttering Club, or just Decluttering Club. You can find our website at thedeclutteringclub.com. We have a free challenge. We'd love to have people come and join us, take our free challenge, give it a try for themselves.
Perfect. Sarah, thank you again and have a great rest of your day. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Sarah, and especially if you are in a season where you've been thinking about decluttering various parts of your life, or you've been interested in this topic and kind of wondering how you can get started, or if you work with clients that struggle with anxiety or OCD or any of these kind of things, and you're and or they may struggle with things like hoarding. I hope that today's session is helpful for you. Definitely connect with Sarah on socials over at her website at the declutteringclub.com. As I was thinking a lot about this conversation, one main thing that I took away is just the importance of doing the internal work. For us as clinicians, I feel like all of us think deeply about these things, and certain objects, right, have deep meanings for us, and just the importance of thinking not just about the object, but beyond the object and what it signifies and what it symbolizes and all of that, and why that work is so important. And also, if you have been like struggling with niches and thinking about this, if this is an area that you're interested in, I mean, there's a clear demand for this work. And as I mentioned, Sarah's built a very successful business from this, and especially even using our clinical skills and even being willing to see some of these folks. I think it can be such a wonderful and healing work in the world. Sarah's website, again, is over at thedeclutteringclub.com. And as she mentioned, she runs a bunch of different challenges during the course of the year to help get you started on your decluttering journey, or your clients as well. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.